After Hina finds out that Chinatsu has been living with Taiki, she realizes that she has developed feelings for him. Meanwhile, the prefectural qualifiers has concluded. Chinatsu and the basketball team has won their way to the nationals. However, in spite of Taiki's improvement, he lost both the doubles and singles badminton tournament. With the loss of his goal of making it into the nationals, how will Taiki move forward? Let's find out. The next day, while at school, Taiki admitted that he couldn't take it anymore. He had reached his limit, so he was thinking of giving up. He was referring to their upcoming midterm exams in a week. Nothing was sinking in during his classes anymore. While at his desk, he wondered why he had to face this right after the tournament. Meanwhile, Kyo invited him to go to practice. He said he had told Taiki to space it out. Taiki replied that spacing out was the hardest thing to do. Kyo made it sound easy, but he just doesn't get it. Kyo commented that Taiki should stop playing the victim. As they walked down the hallway, Taiki was still carrying his book. He said he had practice alongside exams. So by the time he got home, he had no drive left to study. However, Kyo remarked that Taiki always managed to find time for strength training. Taiki then noticed Hina walking and called out to her. However, upon looking, she told him not to talk to her right now. She said she had no mental space to think about anything other than English vocabulary. Taiki was relieved that he wasn't the only one feeling this way. Kyo requested not to be thrown in with their lot, as he had never gotten a failing grade. Taiki claimed the same, but Kyo pointed out the first semester of their second year in junior high. Taiki defended himself, saying it was only because of a stomach ache. As they entered the gym, Hina and Taiki were still studying. They were shocked to see that the girls' basketball team had already started practicing. Kyo explained that they only had less than 2 months before nationals. They were even practicing at night. Taiki stared at Chinatsu and put down his study materials. He got excited and said they couldn't be outdone. So, he suggested they stop studying and start practicing. When Taiki went ahead, Hina mentioned that he seemed really down in the dumps. After the prefectural qualifiers, he had told her he had imagined it, but now Chinatsu was going to nationals. She thought it must be awkward at their house. Kyo replied that although Taiki said he congratulated her, it seemed they hadn't really talked since they were both busy with practice and studying for tests. Hina was a bit let down and just said, "I see." Kyo thought that Hina wasn't the type to be happy about that. Anyway, knowing Taiki, he was sure he'd be okay. He always managed to pick himself up after falling. That was his greatest virtue. Hina agreed with that. During practice, they once again congratulated Kin Go-Haryu for making it to nationals. The coach said it was a relief, as he didn't want all the spots taken by Sejikawa players. Haryu was surprised that was his concern. Haryu then gave a speech thanking everyone for their help. He said he might be a burden from now until nationals, but said here's to teamwork. Because of this, Kyo mentioned that Taiki would probably take a break from doubles for the time being. Now, the coach said it was time for their annual tradition. They would write down their goals and post them on the wall, then remove the goals from last year. The badminton team members began writing their individual goals. Taiki pondered what he should write. Kyo wrote with fortitude and resolution, saying he wanted to write something grand. Meanwhile, Nishida wrote about making it to nationals, while Haryu wrote about winning them. Nishida was annoyed that Haryu's goal was above his and joked they should put Haryu's goal on the ceiling. Taiki still couldn't decide, and after a few minutes, he finally posted his. He was then asked to hand over the tape and reminded not to forget to write that he shouldn't let his grade slip. However, what he actually wrote was to make his smashes more precise. He insisted to the coach that he couldn't write things he couldn't accomplish. That week, they continued to balance studying for their exams while maintaining their practice schedule. Between practice sessions, Hina and Taiki studied in the gym. Meanwhile, Chinatsu remained focused on her basketball practice for nationals, while Taiki hadn't had the chance nor courage to talk to her. At home, while studying in his room, Taiki couldn't help but sneeze, thinking it might be a summer cold. He decided it was time to take a break, so he got up to find something to drink. Just as he was about to leave his room, he heard Chinatsu coming home. Taiki's mother praised Chinatsu for her dedication to practice. Chinatsu apologized for coming home late, but Taiki's mother assured her it was fine and that she didn't need to worry about them. Because of this, Taiki closed his door and didn't come out. He still couldn't face Chinatsu, even in their own home. The next day, after the bell rang at school, the students rejoiced because the exams were finally over. They cheered each other for managing both the tests and practice. So, they decided to go out to eat to celebrate. They urged Nishida to treat them, which encouraged everyone to join. Hyo asked what Taiki planned to do, but Taiki said he'd pass. Hyo worried about his appearance, and Taiki admitted he hadn't been sleeping much lately. He said he'd be okay after a nap. Anyway, he needed to start practicing again from tomorrow. So he said goodbye to his teammates, while Hyo was visibly worried about his friend. That night, Taiki went straight home and immediately lay down on his bed, complaining of a headache. He knew he had a fever and wanted a sports drink, but there was no one at home. He thought to himself that he needed to be careful not to pass it on to Chinatsu. Taiki felt bad because at times like these, he remembered the difficult moments he had experienced, such as his defeat. He hadn't thought about it much because of the tests, but if he had been feeling well, he would have gone for a run to clear his mind in such situations. With his face buried in his pillow, he thought about his moments with Chinatsu and said to himself that he was so uncool. However, someone responded, saying that wasn't true. A hand touched his head, and it turned out to be Chinatsu, who noticed how high his fever was. Taiki was utterly surprised when she told him good job. Taiki suddenly sat up, surprised to see her there. He moved away from her, saying she shouldn't come near him because he was feeling unwell. He said she couldn't risk catching his illness, so she should leave. However, she replied that it was okay. She said that sick people should stay quiet. Taiki didn't expect this response and could only say, "Yes, ma'am." A little while later, Taiki was lying down with a fever patch on his forehead. He couldn't settle down. When Chinatsu knocked, he let her in. She was carrying food and said she had found some udon noodles, so she thought he should eat something first. Taiki sat up, excited that Chinatsu had cooked for him. He thanked her, while Chinatsu mentioned that his mother would probably be home late. So she apologized that the food was so plain. Taiki stared at the udon noodles served to him for a moment. His eyes sparkled because it was Chinatsu's home cooking. When he tried it, Taiki got frustrated because his nose was blocked, so he couldn't taste it properly. Chinatsu worried if there was a problem, and said if there was anything else he wanted, he should just tell her. Chinatsu sat on the floor, and Taiki thanked her again. While holding the medicine, Chinatsu wondered why Taiki was just staring at her. He replied it was nothing, but in his mind, he thought it had been a while since they were this close to each other. Meanwhile, Chinatsu was considering whether 2 tablets would be enough for him. Taiki said he was feeling better now, so she could go back to her room. Chinatsu refused, saying she would stay there until he fell asleep in case of a relapse. But Taiki said he wasn't feeling sleepy. So, Chinatsu proposed they talk for a while. Between the tournament and exams, they had hardly seen each other. Moreover, she reminded him that he had said he had a question for her after the tournament. But if it was too much for him now, he could just sleep. Taiki feigned ignorance and asked if he really said that. Chinatsu was surprised that he seemed to be evading the topic, but Taiki just smiled and said he wasn't. He thought to himself that at that moment, he had the courage to ask that question. Anyway, Chinatsu said she would be the one to ask him a question, and Taiki said okay. She mentioned that she had noticed the badminton team's posters and the goals they had written. She had thought he would write about making it to nationals. So, she wondered why he didn't write that. Taiki replied that while he was competing, he had often wished for his smashes to land. Because of that, he thought that nationals might be too lofty a goal for him right now. He explained that while playing in the actual tournament, he met many players who were better than him. He added that Chinatsu had experienced how tough it was to make it to nationals as a first year, yet she was still determined to take on the challenge. But for him, all he had was the desire to go there and the desire to win. He didn't realize he was in over his head. Chinatsu just looked at him, so he asked her why she was smiling. She apologized and said she was surprised that even he thought about such things. As Taiki had finished eating, she took the tray and bowl, and Taiki thanked her again. Chinatsu was pleased that he had enjoyed the food. Chinatsu added that she thought that was what was on his mind too, but she had assumed he was the type who wouldn't show it. So, she suggested, why not become a new and improved Taiki? As she handed him the medicine and water, She said he could have a lofty goal while still looking at himself as he is now. Taiki couldn't accept that at his current level. She said Taiki noted her determination but admitted that in the corner of her mind, she always wondered if her goal might be too impossible for her. She said determination becomes a kind of pressure, and sometimes, she confessed it would be easier to just settle. Nevertheless, she couldn't stand that kind of thinking. But, she explained, the drive to make it to nationals is what gets her up every morning. So, Chinatsu advised, if he has a goal, something he wants to do or become, he should value it. She encouraged Taiki not to be afraid of having a high goal. Even if it seems impossible, if it becomes his driving force to work hard, then she thinks that's enough. Those are the kinds of people she would support. Taiki was surprised by her words and coughed. Chinatsu became concerned and asked if he was okay. She apologized and said he should probably sleep by now. In Taiki's mind, he thought that this was why he loved her. He realized Chinatsu worried about the same things. And from all she had experienced up to that point, she was able to gently sympathize with others' feelings. So, Taiki told her he would add something to his goal sheet, which surprised Chinatsu, who just said okay with a smile. Taiki stared at her, while Chinatsu stood up to clean his dishes. However, Taiki felt embarrassed and said he would do it. But Chinatsu said it was fine, as he should go to sleep now. Taiki tried to get up from the bed, but his strength hadn't fully returned, causing him to stumble. Chinatsu attempted to catch him. As a result, Taiki fell back onto the bed with Chinatsu on top of him. They stared at each other, caught in this awkward situation. Taiki apologized, explaining that he had lost his balance. However, Chinatsu moved her hand closer to him and held him. Taiki was extremely surprised by this action. While on Taiki's bed, Chinatsu had actually moved her hand to adjust the cooling sheet that had come off his forehead. Chinatsu then stood up and told him to go to sleep. But Taiki couldn't move from where he was lying and just blushed. In his mind, he wondered how he could possibly sleep now. The next morning, Taiki's mother checked his temperature again and found it was 36.5 degrees. She was impressed by his quick recovery, though Taiki still looked a bit off. She couldn't believe that even though he looked tired, he was still going to practice. She advised him to skip practice for the day, but Taiki was determined to go. His mother commented that he and Chinatsu were both so hardworking. As he walked, Taiki thought that he couldn't forget what had happened. Nevertheless, he knew he needed to focus on practice. But he kept imagining the weight of Chinatsu when she fell on him, the smell of her shampoo, and how warm she felt. He sat down on the way, trying hard to get these thoughts out of his mind. Suddenly, someone called out to him. It was Nishida with Haryu, asking if his stomach hurt. Haryu advised him to rest, but Taiki replied that he was fine. He asked what they were doing, and they told him they were cleaning the pool. Their teacher, who was also the athletic director, had instructed them to do so. The teacher had told Nishida that he would overlook his failing marks. Haryu added that the volleyball team was using the gym for a practice match, so they were killing time there until it was over. Since Taiki was there, they suggested he help them too. Initially, Taiki had wanted to do strength training. However, when he saw Chinatsu with the basketball team there, he suddenly changed his mind and joined in. They reminded him not to let his feet get wet. While putting on his boots, Taiki thought to himself that it wasn't because he wanted to be close to Chinatsu or anything. He had no ulterior motives other than to help. He was surprised when he stood up at how slippery it was. Someone asked him to get water, while someone else called out to Haryu. They congratulated Haryu and asked if he should just be cleaning there. He replied it was fine since the teacher said if they helped, they could use the pool. Nishida boasted about Haryu's endless 25-meter lap swims, saying his stamina was really impressive. Haryu then said he'll have them join him, which shocked both Nishida and Taiki when they heard it. Haryu clarified that swimming was a good full-body workout. Because of this, Nishida tried to escape. Haryu then spoke to Taiki, telling him he should know that his smashes weren't his only weakness. Taiki was surprised and annoyed, wondering why everyone was looking at his goal sheet. Haryu added that in Taiki's match against Yusa during the prefectural qualifiers, his reactions were very weak. He had barely moved his feet. Haryu said that the first year would improve even more by next year, so Taiki shouldn't waste his time being down in the dumps. Taiki was shocked by this and admitted Haryu was right, apologizing. Haryu replied that it was okay. He didn't mind if Taiki lost in singles. But since the tournament, Taiki had been low energy. Haryu was just worried that Taiki might start getting discouraged. He said he was telling him this as his doubles partner. Haryu then suddenly asked Chinatsu, who was behind them, if he was right. Taiki was surprised when Chinatsu asked what they were talking about. Haryu responded that they were just discussing the nice weather. Chinatsu agreed, and Taiki concurred. Haryu said that was all they had to say, which surprised the girls, who then moved away. Seeing Taiki sigh, Haryu asked if there had been any progress with Chinatsu. Taiki hadn't expected this, and Haryu was surprised by his unusual reaction. So Haryu said that if Taiki didn't want to talk about it, he wouldn't ask anymore. As Taiki stood there lost in thought, he suddenly called Haryu's attention. Embarrassed, he asked how one could know if they had a chance with someone. Haryu couldn't believe how clueless Taiki was about girls. Taiki admitted to this, saying he thought there were general standards like being called by your first name or being alone together in a room. Haryu was surprised that Taiki really liked Chinatsu. He replied that it depended on the person. Taiki felt embarrassed for asking, realizing the answer wasn't simple. He knew this, but felt he had to ask anyway. And so Haryu asked what Taiki was mumbling about. He added that in Taiki's case, they were talking about Chinatsu. She had no problem talking to guys and could interact with anyone, regardless of gender. But, Haryu said, if she didn't like Taiki, he thought she wouldn't make physical contact. Chinatsu would surely keep her distance. Taiki couldn't believe this and thought about what happened the night before. He convinced himself it only happened because his cooling sheet was falling off. There was no deeper meaning, so there was no point in assuming anything. He looked at Chinatsu and thought he shouldn't expect anything. After cleaning, they filled the pool with water and started swimming. Nishida was excited about it. They invited Taiki, but he passed, saying he had just recovered from being sick. However, he was actually planning to escape from Haryu, which Nishida couldn't believe was serious. Taiki took the cleaning materials to the tool shed and was surprised to find Chinatsu there. She greeted him with good work, which he returned. She asked if he was told to return the equipment, and he nodded. Taiki was very nervous and tried to calm himself, acting natural, but he couldn't help it since they were alone. Chinatsu smiled and said the upperclassmen would be lost without him. Taiki was surprised that Chinatsu didn't seem concerned at all about them being alone. As Chinatsu was about to leave, Taiki suddenly called out to thank her for yesterday. He thanked her for helping his fever go away. She became shy and blushed, remembering what happened yesterday, and just said you're welcome. Taiki blushed too, and as Chinatsu was leaving, he suddenly grabbed her hand, surprising her. Taiki himself was surprised by what he did, so he quickly let go and apologized. He said he was just going to ask where to put the bucket. Chinatsu pointed to the top. Taiki was restless and said he hadn't seen it. He thanked her, and Chinatsu left first. When left alone, Taiki just stared at his hand, questioning what he was doing. He knew he should have been more subtle. Meanwhile, Chinatsu was deep in thought while walking out. When Nagisa saw her, she thanked her for tidying up and praised her for good work. She appreciated her help with her athletic committee duties. Chinatsu said it was no problem since she enjoyed it too. Both were surprised when they suddenly noticed the happy couple, Yamaguchi and Sato. They became shy at their teasing. Nagisa said they shouldn't be embarrassed, as it was nice to see them being so chummy. Meanwhile, Nagisa noticed that since they started dating, Yamaguchi had become cuter. She was delighted by this springtime of youth. Chinatsu told her that if she wanted a boyfriend, she could definitely find one, since she gets along well with guys. Nagisa pondered this and said she didn't think she was interested. After all, she was thinking about their team now, just like Chinatsu. And Chinatsu said she's right. They then noticed the volleyball team. Chinatsu was curious about what was happening with them, and she learned that one of them was transferring to another school. It was because of her sick grandmother, so they were moving to Okayama. She mentioned that the volleyball team had missed their chance to go to nationals. Nagisa suddenly looked at Chinatsu and said how happy their team was that she stayed. She thanked her for helping the girls' basketball team make it to nationals. But Chinatsu replied that it wasn't just because of her. Nagisa added that she should thank her relatives for letting her stay with them. Chinatsu smiled at that thought. Nagisa suddenly said that if there were any hotties where she lived, she might end up in a romance. Chinatsu was very shocked by this statement, and Nagisa wondered about her reaction. Chinatsu clarified that she was the one putting these ideas in her head. But Nagisa said that if they lived in the same house, they would see each other often even if they couldn't date because of practice. Things would be simpler that way. Moreover, she pointed out that Chinatsu seemed like the type who wouldn't easily fall in love unless she was very close to someone. Whether she liked it or not, if they lived together in the same house, she would surely start thinking in that way. It would be even better if that person liked basketball too. Behind her, Chinatsu said that it wasn't that simple. When Nagisa asked if she had said something, Chinatsu replied that she hadn't said anything. That evening, at the Inomata house, they were grilling meat for dinner. The whole family was there, including Chinatsu, so everyone was happy. When Taiki was about to take meat from the grill, his mom told him to eat vegetables too. Chinatsu told Taiki's father that the backyard barbecue was nice, and he responded that his wife runs the grill. Taiki's mom handed her some food, and after tasting the meat, Chinatsu was delighted because it was so delicious. While eating corn, Taiki was looking at her and thought about how much Chinatsu enjoys eating. Taiki's mom requested more vegetables from her husband inside, and Chinatsu noticed this. So, she went inside and asked if she could help. Taiki's dad replied that she shouldn't worry because he was fine. He told her not to hold back and just eat meat. She should think of it as her own house. But Chinatsu replied that since it was like her house too, she couldn't just act like a visitor. Taiki's father didn't expect this response and just laughed. He said she's got a good head on her shoulders, so he apologized, saying he might have been the one holding back. Chinatsu denied this. Taiki's father admitted that since he was always away from home due to his work, they hadn't had a chance to talk. He asked if anything was bothering her, like how full the closet was with his wife's workout gear, or grandpa's offerings of strange flavored sweets. While Taiki was watching them, Chinatsu answered that there was nothing. Nevertheless, Taiki's father said she shouldn't think he'd be offended if she had something to say. But Chinatsu said that wasn't her intention. He added that someone has entrusted their precious daughter to them, so it was their responsibility to ensure she was comfortable. He admitted that at first, she was somewhat hesitant to accept that responsibility. He was nervous about the possibility of her getting hurt, but he and his wife Yukiko had discussed it thoroughly. In a flashback to their conversation, Yukiko understood the responsibility they would take on, so she told her husband she would help him bear that burden. She argued that this year was important for Chinatsu. The weight of these 2 years was very different from 2 years for them. If they had a way to protect that time for her, then they as adults should support it. Back in the present, Taiki's father recounted what Yukiko had said. Anyway, he said Yukiko was the one making decisions in that house. Because of this, Chinatsu thought that sometimes he could be a bit bleak. But Taiki's father added that he was convinced by his wife's words. If that was what Chinatsu wanted, then he knew they should support her there. Moreover, he was very proud when she made it to nationals. So, they should keep that up and win the nationals too. He said they'll be there to support her. And once they were done with that conversation, they should go back to the barbecue outside. Chinatsu was surprised by his words and just smiled, then replied okay. Just then, Taiki came in to say that his mom was looking for noodles for the yakisoba. While searching for it, Taiki wondered what Chinatsu and his father had been talking about. Looking in the cabinet, Taiki's father was surprised to find they were out of noodles. Taiki became nervous about what they would do, since that was his father's responsibility. But his father thought he'd bought some. They were anxious because if his mom found out, they would have to eat only brown rice for the whole month. And so Chinatsu volunteered to go buy some, saying she needed to buy something anyway. Taiki's father was surprised by this and agreed. He consented, and Taiki was surprised that Chinatsu and his father seemed to be getting along well. While getting money, his father said that Taiki should accompany her outside. He hadn't expected this, but his father said they couldn't let Chinatsu walk alone outside when it was already night. Taiki knew that, but he was thinking about how much distance he should keep from her. Chinatsu was puzzled by his reaction, and Taiki suddenly volunteered to go buy the noodles alone instead. However, Chinatsu called out to him and invited him to go out together. Yukiko searched for Taiki and Chinatsu, and her husband said they went out shopping. They didn't have to do that, she said. Yukiko mentioned that it was good that he and Chinatsu had talked. Her husband responded that even though she was only a year older than Taiki, he was surprised at how mature she was. Yukiko just laughed and said Chinatsu was a serious girl. Her husband agreed, saying she was almost too serious. Outside, the two had finished shopping. Taiki asked if they had forgotten anything, and Chinatsu replied that everything seemed okay. In Taiki's mind, they were finally at the halfway point of their outing. While walking, they had only made small talk, but truthfully, he was running out of topics. He thought maybe he should apologize for grabbing Chinatsu's hand. Suddenly, she asked if it would be wrong to eat the ice cream they just bought now. Taiki hadn't expected that. Chinatsu admitted she wanted to eat it already, but she was thinking about how they would still eat yakisoba. Moreover, the ice cream was for everyone, so they should eat it together. Taiki couldn't believe that's what she was thinking about and laughed. He didn't expect that sometimes. Even Chinatsu thinks about such childish things. He handed her the ice cream and said there was a rule in their house that on barbecue nights, they were free to eat whatever they wanted. Chinatsu accepted that and said it was a good rule. Taiki also got ice cream and said it was his mom's policy. Chinatsu suddenly said she was the best and that she was like Taiki if she had to choose between his mom and dad. Taiki couldn't accept that, but Chinatsu told him not to look offended. He admitted he wasn't happy being told he was like his mother. Chinatsu explained that they were similar in being cheerful, strong, and straight-shooter. Taiki fell silent and said she struck him as taking after her father because her mother was somewhat spacey. Chinatsu pondered this because she couldn't figure out what his father was thinking. But that's exactly why they were similar, Taiki said. Chinatsu recounted that when she told his father about her plan to stay with their family, she thought he wouldn't agree. However, he just said, "Is that so?" Maybe because his mom had already told him before she did, so he didn't have much to say to her. But for her, she interpreted it as, she made that decision on her own, so she shouldn't mess it up. Chinatsu said, her father wasn't very good at expressing himself. Taiki was thinking about this when he suddenly became alarmed, noticing a car that almost grazed Chinatsu. So he quickly pulled her away and told her to be careful. Because of this, both were startled when their bodies touched again. Taiki remembered what happened in his room, so he quickly moved away and apologized. He thought to himself that he had touched her again without thinking. He should have been walking on the side closer to traffic. Chinatsu called out to him and brought up what happened the other day when he had a fever. She told him to forget about what happened. Chinatsu admitted that she hadn't been careful enough about living in the same house with a boy. Since she was allowed to stay there, she thought that wasn't a good thing. So she smiled and said she would be more careful, so such things wouldn't happen again. Taiki was surprised by this, and Chinatsu suggested they head home. Taiki thought about whether what just happened was her drawing a line. After returning home, Taiki continued thinking. It seemed like Chinatsu might be sensing his feelings. But that wasn't fair, he thought. After she had told him it was okay to have high goals, she was suddenly distancing herself from him. The next day at school, it was announced that their summer break would start tomorrow. Their teacher reminded them not to cut loose too much. Everything should be in moderation. While his classmates were noisy, Taiki was quiet and thinking at his desk. Hyo noticed that he was too glum for the start of summer break. Hina added that she understood he didn't like homework. Taiki clarified that wasn't it. She asked if that meant homework wasn't his enemy. Taiki replied that wasn't what he was saying either. Suddenly, Hina had a genius plan. After their club practice on Saturday, she suggested they hang out at the library and do their homework together. But Taiki responded that she just planned to copy their answers. Their other classmates heard it and asked if they could join too. Hina agreed and said they should all do it together. While leaving the classroom, Hina was happy that they wouldn't have to worry about homework anymore, but Taiki replied that they hadn't even started it yet. Hina was very excited because she had many things she wanted to do during summer break. But Taiki said she would be busy for nationals. True, she replied, but even their badminton team had practice almost every day. Yep, he answered. Hina noticed something. It was Chinatsu walking below. When she mentioned her name, Chinatsu looked up at them, and they greeted with a bow. But they hadn't expected Taiki to suddenly squat down, and they asked why he was hiding. He denied this and said he just saw some mechanical pencil lead on the ground. Hina responded that he wasn't good at lying. When he stood up, Taiki said it was really nothing. Just the other day, they had a family barbecue and everything was fine. Chinatsu even burned her marshmallow. However, she had told him that being close wasn't a good thing. After she said that to him, he didn't know what to do anymore. Hina was shocked by this, while Taiki invited them to practice. Hina was left behind. It was 28 degrees outside, and the sun was bright. She could feel the wind on her sweaty skin. Finally, their summer vacation has begun. The next day marked the beginning of their summer break. Taiki found Chinatsu brushing her teeth downstairs and greeted her good morning. In his thoughts, he noted that once again, it was just the two of them left there. He felt it wouldn't be natural to simply turn his back and leave. Chinatsu asked him something, but he couldn't understand her. She gestured for him to wait while she finished brushing her teeth. What she wanted to know was whether he had practice today and why he was wearing his school uniform. Taiki was surprised but answered yes. He explained that all his classmates were going to the library at noon to work on their summer homework, hence the uniform. Chinatsu was pleased to hear this and said she should probably follow his example. She wished him good luck before walking away. Taiki thought to himself that everything seemed completely normal. At the Ame school gym, the badminton players had gathered for their practice. Taiki thought that if he could just forget what happened, everything would surely be fine. While practicing, he was determined that nothing should change. After practice, his classmates met up to go to the library together. Hina was told not to sleep, but she insisted she wasn't sleeping. Her classmate added that everyone made an effort to come there, so she should focus. Hina responded by saying that according to some sources, sleeping helps the brain organize memories. Taiki asked if that meant she was actually sleeping. Hina couldn't help it, she explained, because she couldn't understand the math since they hadn't studied it. The others responded that they had indeed studied it. Hina's seatmate helped her by explaining how to substitute X. Nevertheless, she still looked clueless. Their classmate noticed that Ito was finally making moves, since he had a crush on Hina Kano. Taiki overheard this. Since they wouldn't see each other during summer break, this was his chance. They hoped he could at least get her contact information. Taiki was amused and whispered to Kyo that Ito apparently liked Hina. Kyo just replied that he should focus on his homework. Taiki hadn't realized until now that while he wasn't paying attention, everyone around him had been falling in love. Taiki then bought a drink from the vending machine and noticed Hina appearing to sleep on a nearby seat. He asked what she was doing there, and she replied that she was just tired. She said she didn't want to see another number ever again. Taiki responded that that didn't mean she should just sleep. Hina was surprised when Taiki sat down, but he explained it was the only place where he could drink. And so Taiki enjoyed his Coke, while Hina was just observing him. Nearby, some students were chatting about a poster they saw for next week's fireworks festival. They were making plans to go and thinking about inviting others. The two overheard this conversation, which reminded Taiki of when they went to the fireworks festival during their first year of junior high. Hina mentioned that Seijo had organized that outing. She was curious about what he might be doing now. Taiki replied that he was at San High School and in a band. Taiki smiled as he mentioned that was also when they first started talking to each other. Hina was surprised by this and recalled that moment. Seijo showed them the poster for the upcoming fireworks festival. Since they were all in the same class, he invited everyone to go together. A classmate asked Hina if she would join them, and she replied while drooling that she wanted to eat candy apples. She asked if that meant she was coming. When questioned about whether she had practice, she answered it was fine since it would only last until 6. Besides, she said this was her only chance to eat candy apples. So when Seijo asked who would come, she raised her hand excitedly. However, she didn't notice Taiki behind her and accidentally hit his cheek. She apologized to him, and he said it was okay and not to worry about it. Hina's classmate then asked what she was doing, and she replied that she couldn't help it because she was so excited for the festival. Switching to the athletic club on the day of the fireworks festival, Hina was still busy practicing. Her coach told her to position her back better in that part of the sequence. She needed to hold that pose better. She complied and repeated the routine. Because of this, she ended up staying until 6:27. After practice, she ran hurriedly because they had gone over time. It was already 7 o'clock, and she thought the fireworks display would be starting. Sure enough, the fireworks began, and she felt sad because she had missed the start. She immediately started looking for her classmates there. While walking, she found the candy apple store, but they were sold out. She couldn't help but cry because she had been so excited for it. As the fireworks display continued, she had no choice but to accept it. She told herself she needed to endure these letdowns if it meant reaching her goals in gymnastics, like meeting her classmates, browsing the booths, and the candy apples. She kept telling herself she just needed to endure. She was startled when suddenly a candy apple appeared in front of her. It was Taiki offering it to her. Hina was completely surprised. Taiki explained that he had been walking around buying stuff for others when he saw there was only one candy apple left, so he bought it. Hina thanked him and asked how he knew she wanted a candy apple. Taiki laughed and said he had seen how she drooled just thinking about it. Hina hadn't expected him to notice that. He replied that he had never seen that kind of look on a girl before. Back in the present, Taiki said that was the beginning of Hina's violence against him, like kicking and knocking his knees out from behind. But after their first year of junior high, they never went again because of practice and stuff. Taiki stood up and said it was really fun though. He was about to leave when Hina suddenly said they should go to the festival again. Hina suggested they should go together to this year's fireworks festival. She felt shy after saying that to Taiki, but he replied sure. Just then, someone came and called for Taiki because there was a phone call for him. He thanked his classmate and told Hina they should discuss the details later. Taiki checked his phone, thinking it might be his mother asking him to buy something. Meanwhile, Hina's classmate invited her to come back. While walking, she noticed the poster for the fireworks festival and invited Hina to go. Hina apologized, saying she had already promised to go with someone else. Her classmate was excited to hear this and asked if it was a date. Hina denied this. Her classmate explained that when a boy and a girl go to a fireworks festival together, it's considered a date. But Hina insisted it wasn't like that because they were just friends. So her classmate just said she hoped Hina would enjoy herself. Hina blushed at this. Her classmate then apologized for interrupting earlier, but Hina replied that she and Taiki weren't like that. That evening, at the Onomata house, it was mentioned that there were only 3 weeks left before Chinatsu's big event. Yukiko asked how she was feeling, and she replied that she was doing her best for it. Yukiko responded that if she needed anything, she should just tell her. Additionally, since she would be away for a few nights, if Chinatsu would list what she needed, she would buy them for her. Chinatsu thanked her. Meanwhile, Taiki was quiet on the side. Yukiko brought up the fireworks festival coming up this weekend and asked if Chinatsu was going. She asked if Chinatsu needed her yukata taken out. Taiki was very surprised to hear this and got excited imagining Chinatsu in a yukata. After he had distanced himself from her and finished his homework, why did such a topic have to come up, he thought. Yukiko added that her yukata was old, but she had a cute one she could lend her. Chinatsu declined because she was thinking of going straight from practice with her friends. Taiki's fantasy suddenly vanished. His mother asked him about his plans and if he was going to the fireworks festival. He answered that he was going with his friends. Taiki suddenly wondered who else would be coming with them. He thought maybe he should invite Kyo. It was rare for Hina to organize an outing. Yukiko mentioned that she and her husband will impose on the yokois to watch from their house. Taiki was surprised because that was a prime location right next to the event. Yukiko was excited to bring booze, and Taiki remarked that the adults have it so good. The next day at Ame Gym, the badminton team was back at practice. Taiki was practicing his smashes while playing against Haryu, who was also serious about training. Haryu's returns to Taiki were good. Haryu's level was clearly different as Taiki missed his shots and was visibly exhausted. Haryu said it was good practice and thanked him. Taiki thought to himself that Haryu was getting better. At this rate, he wouldn't be able to catch up, and the gap between them would only grow larger. Suddenly Haryu called him, which Taiki hadn't expected. Haryu told him to relax. He just wanted to say that he'd been invited to join a university practice session by a former member on the 31st, from 1 to 5. He asked if Taiki wanted to come along. Taiki was surprised at the mention of university. Haryu added that it would be quite high level, so he doubted it would be easy. He thought it would be a good chance for them to play doubles. Taiki agreed to go. and Haryu had expected this answer from him. As he was leaving, Haryu said he'd call him about the details. Taiki was lost in thought about the invitation. After practice, Hina noticed Taiki spacing out. So she knocked his knees out from behind and asked what he was smirking about, saying she hadn't done that to him in a while. Taiki was startled and asked if she couldn't get his attention like a normal person, saying how many times he had to tell her this. She replied that she was the great entertainer Hina, and when she saw him grinning in the mirror, she couldn't help herself. She noted that he seemed to be smiling to himself more often and called him a daydreamer. Taiki denied this and explained that he'd been invited to a university badminton practice, so he was looking forward to it. Since everyone was preparing for nationals, he needed to value this opportunity. He added that it was the same day as the fireworks festival, but he'd make it on time. Hina said okay and mentioned she had practiced that day too. Taiki couldn't wait for the festival. He remembered how good the yakisoba sold at the booths was, possibly because they used hot grills. Hina couldn't believe he prioritized food over fireworks. Taiki suddenly brought up who else would be coming with them. Hina was surprised, and Taiki hadn't expected her reaction. Hina didn't know how to answer and just said she'd forgotten to invite others, which shocked Taiki. She added that she would invite Kyo and she'll ask around. She hurriedly left, saying good luck. Taiki wondered what was up with Hina's hesitation before answering. While walking, Hina realized she hadn't mentioned that it was supposed to be just the two of them going. She sat down and got annoyed, thinking she had messed everything up. Kyo was surprised when Taiki invited him to the fireworks festival. He was happy when Kyo agreed and said they would meet at 6. But Kyo reminded him about the university practice with Haryu that day, and Taiki replied it would work out time-wise. Kyo commented that he was busy, combining 2 big events in one day. To which Taiki said it was only occasionally, as he wanted to attend both. Kyo was curious about who else would be coming to the fireworks festival, and Taiki answered that Hina would be there. She had suggested it but forgot to invite others, so she told him to talk to Kyo. Kyo was surprised and thought that maybe Hina had wanted it to be just the two of them. Meanwhile, Taiki had no clue about this. Kyo thought that inviting Taiki to the fireworks festival might have been a major step for Hina. But if she had gotten that far, she should have been more direct. He thought she could be awkward sometimes. Meanwhile, Hina was shocked to learn that her friend already had plans to go to the fireworks festival with others. Her friend replied that this happened because she had already said she was going with someone else. Hina said that she could have at least expressed disappointment about not being able to go with her, but she just said no thanks. Her friend asked what happened with the guy who was supposed to go with her, since he already agreed. Hina replied that they were going, but he had thought they were going as a group. Her friend advised her to talk to him again and tell him she wanted it to be just the two of them. But Hina said she couldn't because she had used up all her courage just to invite him the first time. If she got turned down now, everything would be ruined. Her friend sighed while stretching and said this was because she kept trying to play the part of a best friend. Hina hadn't expected that and asked who she was referring to. Her friend couldn't believe Hina thought she was hiding it. On the other side, while playing basketball, Nagisa brought up the fireworks festival to Chinatsu. Currently, Mariko, Sana, and Akari were going. She asked if they should invite boys too. Some boys overheard this from behind and got excited. Nagisa thought romantic feelings might bloom there, and they could also give some protection if they got hit on. The boys in the back got pumped up hearing this. Chinatsu thought before answering that it might be better if just the girls went. She explained that with more people, it would be harder to find a good spot. Because of this, the boys in the back were disappointed. Nagisa agreed with keeping it girls only. Chinatsu thought this was probably best for now as she practiced her shooting. Outside, someone called Taiki. It was Hina. She asked if he was there to get some shuttlecocks, and he said yes since they had run out. Hina mentioned she needed to get something too. She commented that their practices were quite long during summer break. Taiki reminded her to be careful and avoid injury since nationals were approaching. Hina was happy to hear this from him and said the upcoming fireworks festival felt like a reward for them now. This reminded Taiki to tell her that Kyo would be joining them. When asked if she had invited anyone, Hina replied that everyone was busy with their social lives. Taiki smiled and said then it would just be them longtime friends going. He was fine with that since they were close. Hina smiled and suddenly asked if he had wanted to go with Chinatsu instead. He replied that he couldn't go there with her. Besides, the fireworks festival would be crowded. It would be dangerous if someone saw them there. Worse if people found out they lived together. Anyway, even if he invited her, she would surely refuse. Hina asked if he was referring to what she said about not being okay with them getting closer. Taiki told her not to remind him of that. These past months, he thought they were okay and he wanted to get closer to her. But in the end, he was the only one who felt that way. He didn't know how far he could push things before causing problems for her. One wrong move and she might hate him. And so Taiki admitted he was afraid of feeling like he was the only one having these ideas. Plus, that fear grew as they got closer. He noticed her outside the gym, so he suggested they take the other path. Hina realized why when she also saw Chinatsu in the distance. She suddenly punched Taiki in the back, making him say ouch. That was real violence, but Hina said he wasn't being true to himself. She mentioned his concerns about not wanting to cause trouble for the person he liked, or his desire not to ruin the friendship they already had. She understood why he was afraid to make a move. But even though he was scared, he managed to take care of her feelings, as well as his own, while staying positive. Hina admitted that was why he was so cool.
Oh my god! I can't even.
She added that hiding and avoiding Chinatsu was plain uncool, calling him a dummy head. Hina suddenly rushed to run inside, surprising Taiki. He wondered what was up with Hina, as he had never seen that look on her face before. July 31st arrived, and Taiki received a text from Haryu saying he was just in front of the school gate. So he went to look for him. Haryu called out to him and commented that Taiki looked like a lost puppy there. Taiki admitted he had never been to a university before, so he was nervous. Haryu said that when he meets him, he'll be even more nervous. Taiki wondered who he was referring to. Upon entering the gym, Haryu greeted someone, and Taiki was surprised to see it was Yodo. Taiki couldn't believe it when he saw him and asked what Yodo was doing there. Haryu replied that Yodo would be studying at that college next year. Apparently, Yodo sometimes joined their practice sessions. Haryu was called by his friend, and he thanked him for the invitation. Meanwhile, Taiki couldn't help but stare at Yodo. After a brief moment, their badminton practice began. There were many nets set up, and everyone had their own matches. It was announced that after a short break, there would be a singles knockout stage. Taiki was out of breath and thought it was extremely tough. The level was far beyond his usual practice. Even Haryu seemed to be struggling. Taiki looked at Yodo and saw him drinking something. Yodo noticed him staring and asked if he wanted some, though mentioning that he had already put it to his mouth. Taiki was surprised by this and declined. He hadn't expected Yodo to be friendly. Suddenly, Yodo told Taiki that when he gets cornered, he tends to become stiff. Yodo added that before making contact, Taiki overextends his right elbow. He advised him to relax and save it for the moment of impact. Taiki listened and asked if he was doing it correctly. Yodo said to keep his wrist loose and think about the angle of the shot more than power. Yodo called to the person on the other side and told him to serve. Taiki received it and followed Yodo's advice, surprised by his own return. In his thoughts, he reflected on how good it felt. Yodo commented that it was a nice shot. He said if Taiki were hitting like that, he might have scored more points against Yusa. Taiki was surprised by his comment. Yodo didn't stop there and said that Taiki's shots were pretty good when playing doubles. However, he had a tendency to stiffen up during singles matches. It was a shame that he stayed defensive the whole time. In his opinion, given the current situation, the two who would make it to nationals next year would be Haryu and Yusa. He asked what about Taiki, which caught him off guard. Taiki wondered to himself why Yodo was asking him this. After some thought, he responded that he thought so too. Moreover, that makes it easy to understand. Taiki's goal was Haryu, who always chose him as a practice partner. And he remembered his match against Yusa and had plans for revenge. Taiki said it was good to know the clear route he should aim for. The person on the other side prepared to serve. Taiki added that even though he was no match for them now, he was the type who can work harder when he wanted to achieve something. He missed the shot, so his partner told him not to rush into smashing. Taiki apologized and offered to serve for him instead. Yodo thought about what he said and believed it would be difficult. The boys he was chasing were ahead of him because they already knew how to exert themselves the right way in the first place. But Yodo smiled and said he liked it when the underdog wins. It would be cool if a genius exchange student suddenly transferred to a no-name school. After training, while Taiki was trembling, his companions praised him and invited him to come back sometime. Haryu looked for Yodo, and someone mentioned that he had already left for home. His house was apparently a 10-kilometer bike ride from there, so he always left early. Haryu thought that the next time they would meet would be at Nationals. He asked Taiki about his plans after. He confirmed if he was going to the festival, and he answered that he was meeting Kyo and the others at 6 o'clock. However, Kyo messaged their group chat saying he had a fever and couldn't join them at the fireworks festival. Taiki was very surprised when he read this, while Kyo's siblings expressed concern for him. Kyo added that they should still go even if it would just be Hina and Taiki. Taiki was surprised by this and thought about Hina. He scratched his head and told himself to stay cool. Anyway, they walked home together before 2. Haryu left him, while Hina responded to the chat saying it wasn't a problem for her. Meanwhile, Taiki seemed bothered because only the 2 of them would be going. That evening, many people had gathered for the festival. There were many stalls and booths around, and Taiki thought that with so many people there, he hoped he could find Hina. She apologized in the chat that she would be late. Taiki was curious why she was taking so long and thought it might be because of her practice. Looking to the side, he noticed Chinatsu and took a closer look. However, it was just someone with similar hair, which almost gave him a heart attack. It was just a hair doppelganger of Chinatsu. He felt somewhat nervous because of that. Even though it was the same chase, Taiki thought that the fact that it doesn't just go one way is what makes love even harder than badminton. Taiki then noticed a candy apple booth and remembered that Hina liked them. So, while waiting, he bought one for her. But if she didn't want the calories, he thought he could just give it to his mom. He bought 2, and suddenly someone asked if he would give that to her. Taiki replied that he would charge her for it, but was shocked to see Hina wearing a yukata. Hina asked him what was wrong, and Taiki couldn't answer immediately. He thought for a moment before saying, "That will be 300 yen." On the other side, the girls' basketball team was also there. They had come straight to the festival after practice, so they were very hungry. Nagisa asked Chinatsu what she wanted to eat, and she replied that she wanted a butter-roasted potato. Nagisa suggested that they should also share a plate of takoyaki. Suddenly, their teammate noticed something. It was Hina and Taiki walking together. They recognized them as the gymnastics girl and badminton boy who were first years from their school. They were curious if it was a date, which stunned Chinatsu. Their teammate felt envious and wished she had worn yukata too. They noticed Hina's cute hairstyle and missed being younger, though their teammate corrected them, saying they were still young themselves. Meanwhile, as Taiki and Hina walked, they weren't talking. Taiki noticed how quiet Hina was, thinking it was probably the longest she had gone without speaking. And so Taiki said he would buy some yakisoba, while Hina requested ramen drinks. As he walked away, Taiki mentioned that if they were going to buy things, they might as well go together. However, he was surprised when Hina moved away. In her thoughts, she was feeling nervous. She had thought she wanted it to be just the 2 of them, but Kyo had suddenly dropped out. Hina noticed other girls there and worried that her lipstick might have come off after eating the candy apple. She hoped her bangs weren't messy and that her obi or the large sash wasn't twisted on her clothes. Hina was troubled because, truthfully, she really wanted Taiki to notice her. She had put so much effort into this getup just to look cute in his eyes. However, she was also worried that she might look weird. She had never dressed like this before, so she felt somewhat shy. In Hina's thoughts, she wanted him to see her, but also didn't want him to. They then looked for a spot in the field, and Taiki set up a place for them to sit. He told her to watch out for rocks, which Hina thanked him for. While sitting, Taiki mentioned that they seemed to have about 10 minutes left. When he asked if she needed a drink, Hina replied that she was okay. Taiki thought that he was trying to act like everything's normal, but he noticed that Hina's behavior was different. Suddenly, a mosquito appeared. It targeted Hina, which worried her, and she tried to shoo it away. However, it seemed the mosquito had already bitten her, so he offered her his anti-itch cream. Hina felt embarrassed and just touched the back of her neck. She thanked Taiki, who's thinking that it would probably be itchy. Hina reached for the bite on her nape to apply the cream, but Taiki was concerned that she might get it on her yukata. So, he asked for the cream from her and said the bite was on the left side. When he looked at her nape, Taiki felt embarrassed and thought this was even more awkward than he had imagined. Meanwhile, Hina was thinking to herself that she hoped he would hurry up. Taiki noticed that her hair was starting to come undone and asked if she had styled it herself. Hina was surprised and answered yes. She was curious why he asked, and he replied that he was just surprised she had such a delicate touch. Hina asked if he was making fun of her, but Taiki denied it. He said he was actually impressed, but to her, it didn't sound that way. She got annoyed when she noticed her hair had fallen. Hina asked if he was trying to rile her up, but Taiki clarified, saying he knew it wasn't easy to do and that she had put effort into it. So, he thought it was cute and was giving her a compliment. Hina was surprised when he said she was cute. She asked him to repeat it, but suddenly the fireworks display began. They hadn't expected it to start already. When Taiki looked at Hina, he was shocked that the word cute was the reason she looked so happy. They watched the beautiful fireworks display together, and afterward, it was announced there would be a 20-minute break. Taiki excused himself to go to the restroom, and Hina said she would watch their things. Taiki thanked her, and once he was far enough away, Hina couldn't contain her joy because Taiki had called her cute. After using the restroom, Taiki thought it was good that it wasn't too crowded there. He thought maybe he should buy something to drink and wondered what Hina might want. Taiki looked over when he heard someone asking if they were lost. It was Chinatsu speaking to a crying child. She asked the child if she had gotten separated from her mother. When she noticed the child had fallen, she said they should go to the first aid station to get a band-aid. She comforted the child and told her it would be okay. To help her calm down, she said, "Pain, pain, go away." When she raised her hand, she noticed Taiki watching and was surprised. Taiki asked if the child was lost, and Chinatsu replied that she seemed to have gotten separated from her mother. So, she thought about taking her to the organizer's tent. Taiki volunteered to come along if that was okay. Chinatsu was surprised and said she could handle it alone, but he responded that they were going in the same direction anyway. Taiki asked for her name, and she answered that it was Yume. Taiki thought about how Hina was waiting for him, but he couldn't just leave them there. The child stopped and looked at Chinatsu, inviting them all to go together, which caused the two to exchange glances. Meanwhile, while alone, Hina fixed her hair. Usually, she disliked mosquitoes, but this time it had been handy. She remembered Taiki calling her cute. Just then, someone called out to her. It was her classmate Ito. Hina looked over at him. Ito hadn't expected to see her there and asked if she was alone. Of course, that would be impossible, so he was curious if Hina was with her teammates. Hina felt shy and said not exactly. She explained that she was with Taiki, which surprised Ito. Hina added that Kyo was supposed to come too but got sick. All the friends she had invited already had other people to go with. Ito suggested that they watch the fireworks together. He said it would be more fun with more people. He pointed to their spot and mentioned they were watching while standing. But truthfully, it would be better if they could find a place to sit. Ito was clearly hesitant but asked what Hina thought about it. Back to Chinatsu. She asked Yume if she's thirsty. Taiki noticed that Chinatsu seemed good with children, which he hadn't expected. Maybe it was because she was so mature when they talked. Suddenly, he bumped into a woman wearing a yukata. She apologized to Taiki for not watching where she was going, and he said it was okay. In his thoughts, he noted how gorgeous she was. The woman asked if he was okay, but Chinatsu recognized her as Karen and she greeted her back. Taiki was surprised they knew each other. She explained that they were elementary school classmates and best friends. While Karen was saying hello to Yume, Chinatsu mentioned that she was Haryu's girlfriend. Taiki was extremely shocked to learn this. Chinatsu asked if she was with Haryu, and Karen replied yes, saying he was saving their seats. Taiki still couldn't get over this information. From what he remembered, Haryu's girlfriend was supposed to be in show business. Karen became curious about who he was and how they knew each other. And so he introduced himself as Taiki Inomata, explaining that Haryu always looked after him. Karen was surprised when she heard this and confirmed if he was the Taiki Inomata. She laughed when she realized he was the one. Taiki couldn't understand what she meant by the one, so he asked what Haryu had said about him. Karen paused and looked at Chinatsu first. She couldn't answer immediately, and Chinatsu was visibly blushing at the side. So, she just answered that Haryu said he was full of grit. But Taiki thought she was lying. Karen bid them farewell, leaving the two alone again with the lost child. Taiki could see why she was Haryu's girlfriend, and Chinatsu replied that they were a good match for each other. In Karen's thoughts, she saw something interesting. So, she hurriedly went to her boyfriend, Haryu, whom she called Kengo, to tell him what happened. When Haryu asked what it was, she replied that Taiki Inomata and Chinatsu were together. Haryu was curious if they were alone, and she answered that technically there were 3 of them. But she felt they weren't there for a date because Chinatsu was just wearing sports clothes. Karen laughed as she said Taiki seemed like a good kid, and she thought Chinatsu should go out with him. Haryu replied that Chinatsu's mind wasn't on that right now. She agreed with him, then stared at Haryu. Haryu wondered what she meant by that, and she hit him on the head, saying if he slacked off in badminton, everything would be over between them. Haryu said he knew that, which was why he was working hard in both sports and love. In Karen's thoughts, she felt that Chinatsu seemed to be overthinking many things. At the fireworks festival organizer's tent, a man said that the lost child's mother was there earlier but had left to search for her child. So, he said he would make an announcement on the loudspeaker, while Taiki volunteered to look for her. He told Chinatsu and Yume to stay there, saying he'd be back soon. Chinatsu then told Yume they should see if they could go inside. They sat on the chairs in the tent. Yume mentioned that the woman they saw was wearing a beautiful yukata. Chinatsu agreed. Yume was delighted, saying it had many flowers and was very cute. She asked if Chinatsu wanted to wear one too. Chinatsu was surprised by the question and thought about it. She answered, just a little. She showed her shirt and said it was cute too. But the child asked if that was her Sunday best. Chinatsu couldn't believe she knew that phrase and replied that her uniform was her Sunday best. Yume was curious about that, and Chinatsu explained she wore it when playing basketball. The child got excited hearing that. Chinatsu shared that when she wore it, she wanted to be the coolest. Chinatsu then remembered her previous conversation with Karen. She couldn't believe that she lived in the same house as a first-year student from their school. Chinatsu clarified that she was just staying at their house, and Karen replied that it was the same thing. She confirmed if Chinatsu hadn't developed feelings for him, like thinking he was handsome or maybe liking him. Chinatsu paused and admitted that she had thought about those things. Back in the present, Chinatsu said she seemed to be the awkward type, which was why she really couldn't wear yukata. Yume was surprised by what was said and replied that she understood because she was the same way. Whenever she wears a yukata, it gets all messed up. That's why in the end, her mother puts it on her. Chinatsu laughed at what she said, while Taiki was running back with Yume's mother. She called out to her, and Yume was delighted to see her mother. Her mother asked where she had gone and hugged her. Taiki explained that she heard the announcement, which was how he found her quickly. And Chinatsu was happy about that. Yume's mother bowed to them and said she didn't know how to thank them enough. She hoped they would allow her to repay them somehow. She asked if she could at least buy them drinks, but both declined, saying she shouldn't trouble herself. Chinatsu squatted down and talked to Yume, telling her not to get separated again. Yume looked at her and suddenly approached Chinatsu. Her mother was surprised by what she was doing, but it turned out she was reaching for her hair clip. She gave it to Chinatsu and said that while wearing a yukata was difficult, the clip was easy because you just clip it in your hair. Now, she said, she looked pretty too. She added it was super cute on her. Chinatsu hadn't expected this. Yume's mother came closer and said if there wasn't any problem, she hoped Chinatsu would accept it. Chinatsu felt shy but couldn't do anything since the child was happy to give it as a gift. So, she just thanked Yume, while the mother and daughter bid them farewell. Chinatsu held the clip and asked Taiki what he was laughing about. He replied it was nothing. Chinatsu felt embarrassed and said he was being rude, especially since Yume had just given it to her. Taiki responded that it looked good on her. He suggested she should just leave it in her hair. In his thoughts, he worried it might become awkward if he told her how cute she looked now. Chinatsu was speechless. Taiki laughed again, and when Chinatsu noticed, he explained that it was because she was staring at him. He said she should wear it until they go home. It would hurt Yumea's feelings if she saw that Chinatsu had removed it. Chinatsu had no choice but to agree. Anyway, she admitted it helped her look stylish. Taiki asked if he could take a picture of her, but she didn't allow it. Taiki was afraid that if things became awkward between the two of them, their fun time together would come to an end. The fireworks display started again after a 20-minute break, just as the two were together. This was the second segment of the show, and everyone was looking up at the sky to watch it. As the show began, Chinatsu told Taiki that he'd better get going. After all, she had left Nagisa and the others waiting. Taiki paused and just said okay. They agreed to meet at home, and she said see you. The two parted ways, and Taiki became worried that he had left Hina alone longer than he expected. They had come together, but he just left her by herself. He felt he needed to apologize to her. When he returned, Hina, who was sitting down, welcomed him back. Taiki apologized, and she said he owed her one. He asked if she had any problems while waiting, and if there was anything else she wanted, he would buy it for her. Hina replied that there was nothing more she wanted. She said the vendor food was delicious and the fireworks were beautiful. She said it was the best, and she wished they could come again next year. Taiki agreed, but in Hina's mind, as she looked at him, she hoped just the two of them again next year. Chinatsu returned to where her team was, and they were curious about the hair clip she was wearing. She said it was a long story, but Nagisa wondered why she looked so sad. Where will we be? A year is a long time. How will we change? These thoughts filled Taiki's mind as he watched the fleeting fireworks.